I'm Matthew Cavnan. I work at Amazon Alexa. I'm on the international team, and I'm responsible for our global agency strategy. And we have an interesting panel here today. Obviously, you've already heard from Nick and Usra. And so we're bringing the agency flavor, and we're also bringing the brand flavor. So I also want to introduce Andrew from Mercedes-Benz as well. I've got a bunch of questions written on my little piece of paper here. We're going to get through them. We've got about 15 minutes or so. I'm going to ask some questions, but then I'm going to turn it back over to Perry, and then we're going to also take some audience questions. So, of course, we want to involve you in the conversation. And as any kind of brand-focused, presentation or discussion goes, we like to know a little bit about our audience as well. I did introductions up here. I'm going to skip the part we talked about you guys talking all about what you do in your thing, because you two have, but I'm going to give Andrew the chance because we're limited on time. But I also want to ask the audience, how many people in the audience are representing a brand? Okay, brand, lots of brand hands coming up today, great. How many agencies do we have in the house? Okay, lots of agencies and tool providers. How about media? How many media teams do we have here? Awesome. So it's good. This is a great forum here at CES to have this conversation, and we're all on our own voice journey together as a category, but we're also on a voice journey from a brand perspective. So we're going to get into the conversation. So Andrew, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we can jump into the panel?
Yeah, you bet. So my name is Andrew. I work in our Silicon Valley office of Mercedes-Benz Research and Development. So we make sure that we look into the next trends and to develop products that are really at the height of innovation at any given time. So right now I'm responsible for UX, data, and AI, understanding how this affects the Mercedes brand and how we can use this to connect to our customer. And right now that especially includes the Hey Mercedes voice assistant.
Excellent. So let's jump in. I've got a whole list of questions here, but I'll try to get some of the most interesting ones. But let's start with as you know, in the conversation around brand. Let's start with just why voice. Why does voice matter to your brand? We'll start with Usra, and then we'll go down this end. And it's the same conversation also for agencies as well. So yeah, why voice?
Why does voice matter to our brand?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said earlier, voice is actually one of the most important things to our brand. For us, for Disney, it allows us, like I said, to connect with our guests. That's very important. But not only does it allow us to connect with our guests, it allows families, kids to connect with their favorite characters, right? To hear them, to listen to them, to imagine with them. So many times I see kids, they've got this large imagination, right? They want to be Buzz Lightyear. They want to be a princess. Through voice, through smart speakers, we're able to finally put them in that setting, right? And that's
awesome.
That's a very beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And it's very important to us. So I think from our perspective at Disney, it really is the connective tissue directly to our guests.
Yeah. I might add to that also that encourages the families to do things together as well. So
absolutely. And that's a great point, right? Usually if you have a smart speaker, I know at home it's sitting in my kitchen. Mm-hmm. Right? Everyone congregates around the kitchen.
Yeah. And
so we always hear where families are playing trivia together or they're listening to stories together. You saw the Google Home and little golden book. It's reading time in the evening, right? And so that is an incredible thing also that you're able to bring families together. Yeah.
Thank you. Andrew, how does voice matter for your brand?
Yeah, I mean, for us, as Nick was saying in his presentation, automotive is an area where voice is sort of singularly important in that we're trying to drive this huge hunk of metal down the road at God knows what speed and without running into anything. And so I want to have my hands on the wheel. I want to have the eyes on the road.
Gonna keep on time.
And so this means that when you want to operate any of the systems in the car, the most natural way to do it is through voice interaction because that is the least distracting environment you can have in such an environment.
Excellent. Thank you. Nick, how about for your brand?
I think from a product development agency perspective, we don't build websites or we don't build apps. We build around experiences. And so voice is a natural modality and it adds another natural interface to widen how we reach customers and widen the experiences that we build, because as customers are increasingly more savvy to kind of choose when we use a phone, choose when we use an app, choose when we use a website. And so voice is just another another layer within kind of our product architecture, essentially, of how we reach those customers and how we build those experiences.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask the same question with just a different pivot. I mean, I asked you how it mattered to your brand. How do you think voice matters to your customers? The most probably important of all our lives are our customers.
I'm going to take brand away for a minute, right? Like this really is about us, and we're consumers, we're customers.
Yes.
I think, I'll speak for myself, is it gives me access to things that I wouldn't have had access to before, right? So when I think about just the usage, and it's interesting because we talked about this earlier too. I don't think we're quite there yet, right? We're still speaking into, or we're talking into a speaker. Like it's not yet natural, which is something that we need to continue to evolve and iterate upon. But it matters. Like, I get up and I won't say what I use, but I play my music in the morning. Right?
We're on a voice journey together.
I have my TV connected to it. It is changing my life. It is making it easier. I think about just in the automotive industry, right? Like hands-free. That's pretty cool, right? And if I'm driving to drop my kids off to school, or if I'm on a long trip, or if I'm going to Disneyland, for example, I'm able to call out those experiences, and I never had the ability to do that before. So I think it's going to be, for me, I can say personally, it changes the way I live my life. And I think for our customers as well, that's what we need to think about. It's not just about, hey, let's create a story and put it up on this platform. Is this bringing something that is delightful to them, right? So I think that's important.
I think the customer delight's a really important aspect. One of the things we see is people have a really deep relationship with their vehicles. It's a very emotional part of, especially in the American market, but a very emotional part of the experience. Yep. And if you look around, a huge number of people, they have their first kiss in the car. They, drive to their wedding in a fancy, car with whatever makes sense to them. And so it's really an important part of our lives. And so this set of interactions that we get at the same point, when we're in the car, we're talking to the car. And this lets us bond with the car and continue this emotional reaction. Yeah. And I think that's a really important part of building a story behind what you're really trying to do instead of just issuing commands. Yeah, great.
And Nick, from your perspective, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you probably have two kinds of customers, right? And I have the same redirect. You've got the customers who are clients, who are brands, but you also have the end customers. So for you, how does voice affect your customers?
Well, I guess we always think about things from a kind of end user perspective always. Even when we're talking to brands, it's about what problem or unmet needs are we trying to solve. I think just to add a different flavor to it, because I agree with everything that we've already just been saying, but also there's a lot of unmet needs, and voice is a really powerful technology to reach people who perhaps haven't had the same experiences with other technologies. So there's huge accessibility benefits. There's a wealth of different experiences that we can build with voice, and watching how children, for example, interact with voices is hugely entertaining to watch, but also providing really interesting, rich experiences that are kind of really valuable to that child's development in a different way to what they're getting from a visual interface.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, right? It's been a world of apps and tablets, particularly for kids. And the thing that we heard most from parents is that kids are always just nose down.
Right.
Right. This allows them to look around, to
walk down the street. Everybody's
and it does stimulate different types of emotion, like different types of patterns, right? Learning patterns as well.
In some respects, it allows us to be almost more human.
More human.
Yeah.
You interact, right? I see my nephews and nieces, like they'll come home and they'll run up to a smart speaker and say, they've got homework, what's 8 times 8, right? Like they're speaking to it. Speaking to it. And that's very interesting to see young kids grow with these smart speakers.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit around. So we covered, customers and we covered brand. And it's like the other thing that I think I hear this in a lot of the meetings that I'm at. It's like people want to know what everybody else is doing. So case studies and those kinds of things. But one other big question that people are asking, especially brands, is how are you going to market? Right? And you can ask that in a lot of different flavors, but like from a go-to-market perspective, what do you think is important? What are you doing? How are you driving that engagement that everybody talked about? I think that word engagement is something that we should all share collectively around. That's how we know when things are working well, whether it's in voice or whether it's in web or anything, but that engagement is super important. So go-to-market strategy. What are you thinking?
So we have a lot of work to do, right? Like as a segment, as everyone who is in this room, we all agree that discovery is still an issue, right? And we'll get there. It will get there. It's like the day, when apps, like how do you get through the app store? How do you find the right voice experience without a visual, right? We're starting to see visuals now. At Disney, we're also very thoughtful about not only what we create, but how we bring it to market. How we bring it to market and then how we market it or raise awareness around it. And so we partner, of course, with Amazon, Google, a lot of different companies. But really, it's Disney as well. We make sure that we do as much as we can to build awareness. I talked earlier about the Little Golden Book. Mm-hmm. That was a very big endeavor for us. It was very thoughtful, again, about how we place it at retail. What's the positioning around it? What's the messaging around it? How do people know that when they open a book, they're supposed to do X, Y, and Z, mm-hmm. right? We're still also teaching the consumer.
Fair.
So I think there are a couple of things as we think about go-to-market. It's not just about developing content or experiences. It's about making sure that we're educating the consumers. That's critical, right? How do you find something? Discoverability, marketing, merchandising. This is important if you're a developer out there. Talk to your platforms, make sure that they are merchandising it and that there's product placement for it. So same type of attributes that we would do with a physical product through sell-through at retail is the same thing that we would do with a voice experience.
Great. How about for you, Andrew, Mercedes?
I bounce off the idea of feature discovery, because feature discovery it's more than just knowing what's out there. It's knowing how we can use it, what are the full capabilities, and what does this mean? And so we can say, well, I'm in a car. It's pretty reasonable that I can roll up and down the windows. I should probably be able to do that by voice. We say, how exactly would we expect to do that? If you ask 100 people what words they would say to change the windows, you'll get 200 different answers back. And most of these people would be guessing, might not want to just guess, and it's too hard. They just look around for some physical controls. And so we want to make sure that the customers know what sort of things they can say and get comfortable with the idea that they can really interact with the car using natural language, and that really anything they say is a valid conversation. And we need to take it, rather than having the voice system being a set of commands the user has to learn, but the voice system needs to learn what the user wants to do and enable the user to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and most importantly, how they want to do it.
It should feel seamless. It should just feel natural.
Yep. Yeah. Great. How about you, Nick?
Yeah, I think it's a shared responsibility between both like Amazon or Google if it's a platform play, but also the brand. And so just building and making something won't ever, like whether it's an app or a voice skill, it won't drive customers to it. And so when you're solving a need, I really like this idea as well that we're kind of really starting to see over the next few years of kind of how physical prompts, such as the book in the Disney example and the read along, and augmenting because voice really augments what we're already doing and what kind of experiences and products we're using. And so thinking about how voice can fit into that customer journey and have the right prompts along that way to ensure that kind of users are aware that there is an opportunity for them to interact with that brand directly, I think is a really powerful thing that we're going to really start to see, I think, as we take more responsibility as a product or company or in delivering great experiences.
Very good. Well, that takes us to the end of the questions I have on the piece of paper. It also takes us to around 3:15. So Pete, I don't know if you're still in here. Are we good to go a couple more minutes? Or?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So I want to invite Perry from WPP Potato, to come up and ask some audience questions. So if you're in the audience, do we have a mic runner? Pete's going to be our mic runner. So if you have a question, please stand up. Pete will come over there and give you the microphone, ask the question, and then we'll have our panel answer that. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah.
We've run a little bit over on time, but I just want to be mindful of time, but also give the audience an opportunity to ask any broad questions or questions to anybody individually up here on the stage. And with that,
I'm running to the back of the room right now, Mr. David Hayfitz with
We have
Prudential.
Thanks, Pete. I had the privilege of being on a panel earlier, and it was with enterprises. And so we talked a lot about security and privacy and regulation. And it doesn't come into play so much when you get into the consumer side. But I'm wondering how it enters your minds. And, this example earlier, I have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I can't pull them away from the Alexa. They love to sing and dance, and they'll be down. And I haven't heard from them for an hour. But when you throw merchandising in there, it becomes there is that fear factor. It's always that benefit versus the fear, risk versus reward. So how does that play in, same across the boards for all three of you, in the considerations when you're dealing with consumer? You want to give as much content and as much flexibility as possible, but then when you add children or you add other communities in, it can be challenging as well. So how do you address that?
Why don't you get started?
Thanks. I mean, look, privacy, security, these are all questions that have been raised for the last few years. I'll speak on behalf of Disney. That is the number one priority for us, especially because we are connecting with kids every single day. And so we have a team, a very large team, that we are in lockstep with, right? There's nothing that we do that is not reviewed by our teams. We're also obviously the Walt Disney Company. With any company, security and privacy is key to us. So we'll never do anything. We'll never there will never be a call to action, for example, right, to make a purchase. In fact, again, strategically, we're partnering with the right partners to make sure that we are not crossing those boundaries, right? We're never going to go out there and do something that we shouldn't be doing unless it's reviewed. So, I think with all of us here, we have this conversation, and all of you out there, it's our job to make sure that we're taking it very seriously, and we are.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's important is to look at the ramifications of the brand image. So when you take a brand like Disney, where you're trusting, your kids with it, or a healthcare company, or in our case, Daimler is also an extremely private company when it comes to handling of customer data. And so because it's part intrinsically of the brand, we want to make sure that we match the experiences and therefore the appetite for data security in with the user of the actual brand.
Yeah, and speaking from a non-owner perspective, but from a kind of product development perspective, when we talked about purposeful products, kind of the pinnacle that we look for products to do is to benefit society. And so we build upon trust to get to that point. And if we do things that would break that trust with our customers, then we're going to go right back to the base of that pyramid that I showed, which is kind of, at the end of the day, we're just solving a problem for those users, but they don't even trust that we're doing that, solving that problem to benefit them. We're solving it for kind of the company's benefit. And so we need to make sure that we maintain that trust, but we're doing things that benefit society and benefit the user.
This question is more for Andrew. A question on the cars and voice, and a lot of proprietary manufacturers, or a lot of manufacturers have proprietary voice. Do you see how Google or Alexa would integrate into that, or how do you see the market going?
Well, the important thing in automotive, or really anywhere, is that the brand can connect with the customers. And so when I'm in a car speaking to my car, I want to feel like I'm connecting with the brand of car that I've purchased and the brand of car that I choose to interact with. And so I think it's very important for the UI layer, whether it's a visual UI, whether it's the interior design, or the voice assistant, to map to the brand itself. And so we have our Hey Mercedes voice assistant brand, because we want the customer to be connecting with Mercedes.
One last question. Anyone? Oh, right over here. James from London. He's back.
So Nick, when you were talking earlier, something that was quite interesting was the please function. And I guess what that indicates is that when you start to engage with voice as a brand owner, you have to start thinking about the character and ethics or the personality that you as a brand are going to employ. And has that influenced the way that that you developed your voice activities so far? The kind of character
Yeah. So some of the work that we've done has been with, for example, gaming clients. And those have been really fun experiences to work on because character and storytelling, much like as I was talking about Disney, it's really interesting to be able to kind of think about that character and that voice and building the personality. But at the same time, you have to think about the fact that somebody is going to actually also interact with that person and so that you're building. And so you need to think about the other side of the coin, which is what is the other person going to feel or behave when they talk to that person? And so thinking about language and getting into kind of the linguistics of it and thinking about which words you choose and why you're choosing those words to interact with somebody is quite important. And I think that's one of the really interesting things from the technology aspect, which is there is a huge human component in building these experiences that I think we sometimes forget when we talk about AI and machine learning and all the rest. We need some of the greatest copywriters in the world to really build great experiences coupled with design and engineering. And it's really about a number of different talents that get us to build these great experiences. It's not going to be a AI-driven, machine learning-driven thing where you're going to have a character spit out whichever words it is, because there's a huge human element at play.
Yeah, and I just want to add, because you mentioned characters, the authenticity of the character, right? In your mind, you have an idea, for example, of what Mickey Mouse might sound like. And so to this point, for us particularly, most of our work goes into finding the right talent, to writing the right scripts. A lot of people don't know that, right? I would say that, 70%, 60 to 70% of the amount of development that we do goes into really making that experience authentic. Because if we can't make it authentic, then again, it's all about the brand, and we're really not representing the brand correctly.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. You've been a great audience and a great panel. Give it a hand for these people up here. This has been fantastic.